All right, I'm going to go over verbs quickly with you. I want to talk about verbs when we're analyzing verbs, and you'll see this in my work, and this is really important that you do this. You're going to analyze two pieces of each verb. We're going to identify its stem, and on this section here we see the stems that are listed, and these are the basic ones. There are other stems, but these are our base stems. We have call, pi'el, hifil, nifal, pual, hofal, and hithpael. Now, the way the stems are organized is if you didn't really quite get this in OT 501, our base stem is the call stem, and it's often called the G stem, kind of the ground stem, the baseline stem. This just gives, it has what we would consider just essentially basic action, either a fientive verb, which means a verb that requires an object, or an action verb. Sorry, a fientive verb is an action verb, or a stative verb, a verb that just gives a state. And this is an active voice, meaning the subject does it. So across the top here, these are active voice verbs. So he ran, she ran, they will run. Those are active voice. Now, the second row would be passive voice verbs. That's where the action is done to the subject. So instead of, if I would say, it's active would be I kick the dog. Passive would be the dog was kicked. You hear the difference. So active, the subject does the verb. Passive, the subject receives the action of the verb. The third category would be what's known as middle or reflexive. This would be the bottom one. And in terms of this category, the nifal can be both passive or reflexive or middle. You'll see that. Middle voice, reflexive voice, is the subject does the action as it involved in the action, and in some level receives the action. So if you wanted to say, like, instead of I kick the dog, that's an active with an object. What if I kicked myself? There I'm both doing the action, receiving the action. That would be kind of a classic example of that middle reflexive voice. So your nifal will do that in this category, and then there's a verb hithpael that has that middle reflexive category for these other stems. Now as we go across here, and you can pick this up, this has to do with these two categories here also implies some causal forms, and that there's causation that's involved here, and you'll see that in your review of that when you look at the Arnold Choi sections on these stems. So just notice how the stems are laid out, and in the back of Arnold Choi you'll see a nice chart that lays this data out in a little bit more detail than I have, but I wanted you to be able to have some control over that. So you're going to describe how is the stem used, and you can see that in the notes on 1-6-7. Now the other piece you have to do when you're analyzing a verb is to say something about the verbal type. And I've listed the verbal types up here again, and you can, if you have Arnold Choi, open up to, the stems are all 3.1. The verbal types are all listed in 3.2, 3.3, 3.4, 3.5. I've just included all of those types into verbal type here. We basically have perfect and imperfect. I mentioned that in a previous video. Past narrative. These three are probably your most common with past narrative, especially in Hebrew narrative is going to be very typical. Again, Arnold Choi calls this the imperfect plus vav consecutive. I just believe that John Cook calls this past narrative or past narration. There's also participles in Hebrew, imperatives, jussives, and I should have also put cohortative. Cohortative off the screen there. All three of these, imperative, jussive, and cohortative, are different types of commands that we see in the Hebrew Bible. So you'll see all of those. And then there's infinitives, and there's two kinds of infinitives. There's an infinitive construct and infinitive absolutes. Both of these have distinct uses. So when it isn't enough to call something an infinitive, you need to say what kind of infinitive it is. So whenever you find one of these verbal types, you're going to want to look it up in Arnold Choi and describe how it's used. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. That just gives you a baseline. We could say a lot more, so whatever questions that this video raises, you can post those up and we'll talk about that. But this is essentially where I start off in class. Now, again, continue to review Exodus 1, 6 to 7. Now, the last thing you have to analyze are nouns. Again, nouns are the most straightforward because in general you're basically saying, is this noun a subject? Is it an object? Again, if it's an object of a preposition, you analyze it as a preposition. Is it a direct object? Your indirect objects are usually prepositional phrases. The one piece that you're going to have to work on with labeling nouns is going to be if you find something that's in a genitive. And again, how does Hebrew tell you that you have a genitival relationship? Something's in a genitive. It's going to be that construct state. So pay careful attention to nouns that are in construct. And remember, they can happen in chains. So there can be several constructs, and that chain will end with an absolute noun. And when you look that up, look up genitives and describe what type of genitive do you find functioning when you find words that are in construct with each other. Again, you can see some clear examples of that in the notes on 1, 6, and 7. Again, good luck with the assignment. Again, happy to do more, and I can say more, but these 3 videos are designed to give you a quick, about a 20-minute review to get you started. Look at the notes. Anything that's not clear, ask questions. I'll be monitoring our conversations carefully. Look forward to seeing your work. And remember my Fear of Hebrew video, practice truly does make perfect. All the cliches, Rome wasn't built in a day, you eat an elephant one bite at a time. Wherever you find yourself with Hebrew, begin to do the work. It's going to take some time. This is going to be a long assignment this week because you're not used to doing this. But if you practice, it gets faster. And again, keep in mind what the end is. We're going to be powerful proclaimers of the good news to the world. And the only place we get our authority is from the Scriptures. And Hebrew is a key tool to getting us to dig deep into the Word in search of God's deepest magic. I'm Brian Russell, and look forward to our work together this week.